Well. Good evening, good evening, good evening. It is Friday night and time to get us going. I'm so excited to have you guys here with me tonight. It's Friday night and it's another episode of the Purposeful Productivity Show with me, Florence, your host. Projects are how we move our business, our houses of faith, our lives forward. And we don't execute projects as a solo person, we execute them with a team. Here's the thing: leading a team through completing a project is chaotic and it is often referred to as herding cats. I had that said to me today by somebody I'm working with, and it really resonated. So, tonight is for us cat herders. We will use and talk about using the humble, non assuming checklist when we're working with the team to complete a project. How do we do that is what we're going to talk about tonight. So, again, welcome to the Purposeful Productivity Show. I'm Florence, I'm your host. I work with faith based organizations, small businesses, leaders of all types, executives and nonprofits to help you remove the friction in your productivity system. I call it fixing the friction and then helping you to achieve your goal that you're working for, which is on purpose. It has a purpose to it. So I'm excited to have you here with me. If you are part of the live tribe, welcome. So glad you're here, whether you're commenting in the building with us tonight, and we're going to get to some of those people, or you're watching and you're not able to comment for whatever reason. You're driving, cooking, taking care of family. Glad you're here, and so glad that you're a part of the live tribe. And for those who join later, that magical, wonderful replay crew, thank you for listening to this information. And I want to bring you value so that you can use it and make a difference in how you proceed through your day. So today is all about how leaders use checklists to empower your team for project success. This is not just about us, it's about our team. So before we get into that, I'm going to see who's out there, who's in the building with us tonight, and just say good evening. Of course, we have Frank Jackson, one of our moderators here. Thank you for always being here, always in the chat, always looking out. Thank you so much. And we also have the emotional CEO here saying hello to the live tribe. Thank you for always reminding me to recognize those who are in the building with us. We're going to jump right into the information. I want to start with the benefits of using checklists as we work through them and completing our projects. So this is benefits for completing projects. I'm going to start with the good stuff. Why? What do you get out of it? What's the value? First of all, checklists, they are a really good planning tool and a way to help organize tasks, ensuring that every step in the project is accounted for. There's no, oops, I forgot. There's no, oh, did we do? Because the checklist, and there's multiples, help guide through the entire process so that you don't forget. They also are great reminders. Again, not keeping it in our head, not working from our head, but really looking objectively at something where the information we need is where we can see it, not only us as leaders, but our team, and keeps us all in alignment and make sure we don't overlook a detail or we don't forget a detail. It also allows us, checklists, they also allow us to track progress. We can see how much is complete, how much is yet to be done, and determine, are we where we expect to be by this point in the process. If you're 2 weeks away from an event and at the 2 week mark, you should be hitting a certain milestone, then your checklist can tell you, are you hitting that milestone or are you not hitting that milestone, and allow you to measure completion. I said before, but I'm going to say it again. It's a way to outline all of the steps involved, from defining what you want to accomplish, what your objective is, to actually wrapping up the very last thing that needs to happen on the project. So, organizations of all sizes use these checklists to execute projects every day. Whether you are a small business with a small team of 2, 3, 5, 10 people, or you are a global organization, you're part of a global organization or a large ministry, checklists to execute projects are very powerful. So let me just say this, because sometimes it can be a little hard to imagine what type of organization I'm talking about. So I'm going to go a little bit deeper in this explanation. When I say a faith-based organization, I'm not talking one faith or another. I'm not talking Christian, non-Christian, whatever that faith is. But there's an organization around it. They're the people who come together. Every organization is made up of people. So there are people who come together to worship in that faith, to work together to move that faith forward, to spread their message. They have to work together. And so there are all kinds of projects in that organization, in that faith-based organization, that happen, whether it's designing a new set of graphics, or putting together a service, or planning a conference or a summit, planning a study. Those are all projects. Oftentimes people think that it's, oh, I'm going to go to service on Sunday and it just magically happens. No, there's an entire project that happens to make that service work, whether it's on Sunday, whether it's on Saturday, whether it's on a different day of the week. And the same is true in a small business. We often think that work just happens. No, if you're in a small business and you're doing something simple, or we think is simple, and we should know, planning a customer service event where you're celebrating your clients, there's an entire project around planning for that event. The event itself is one thing, but planning for it is the project, and making sure all of the details are taken care of. So that's what I mean by planning for a project. And whether you are a small business, or you're a faith-based organization, or you're a nonprofit leader, it all applies. So let's start with something that also, so we've defined the benefits. The second piece is we want to get some housekeeping taken care of. We want to get a little bit of housekeeping. I'm having trouble with my earpiece tonight. Housekeeping and a framework in place to know that we're operating consistently. And so, first of all, you're working with the team. So you train your team to use checklists for everything. For projects, tonight is our topic, but really train your team to design, develop, and use checklists for everything that they do with you, and for you, and for your clients, and for your congregation, and for your members. Train them. That means explain the purpose for checklists, the purpose of using checklists to them, so that the team really understands the power and they don't see it as an annoyance or just one more thing to do. Okay? Walk your team through the checklist that you have. This step could be multiple times, because we as humans, while we use checklists, we forget. We forget that checklist is over there and we can use it, unless we have some way of constantly being reminded that it exists. This constant reminder is one of the things that people who have been in the military are very familiar with. Because I was in the military, if you don't know, I was in the military at one point in my life. And so one of the things we did, and still happens if you're in a military organization, whether it's full time or part time or whatever the case may be, is drills. And drills are there not because you don't know what to do. Drills are there so that you cannot forget what to do. When you're tired, when you have not slept, when you're hungry, when you're not feeling well, the constant reminders and walkthroughs is so that you don't forget what to do. And that is the same with walking your team through these checklists on a regular basis. And then the companion to that is having your team practice using the checklist. I'll just leave that there because I think I've covered it. The next piece is provide feedback to your team on how they're doing, how successful they're being using the checklist, but also get feedback from your team on what's working and what's not working, what needs to be tweaked and changed and modified so that it actually works. Next, this one is probably the thing that gets organizations in trouble the most with these checklists. Decide where you're going to store them and always use that same location to store them. What do I mean by that? Decide what software you're going to use to create them. If you are use Microsoft, you can use Microsoft Word, Excel, OneNote. They all work. If you use Google, you can use Google Docs, you can use Google Sheets, you can use Google Keep. They all work. If you use Apple, you can use Pages, Numbers, or Apple Notes. They all work. If you don't use any of them and you have another preference, you can use some software like Notion or Trello or Evernote or ClickUp or Asana. But wherever you decide you're going to store these checklists, be consistent in where you place them. Put them in the same place. So for me, this darn earpiece is driving me crazy today. For me, I use Evernote, and I have been experimenting with using Google Keep because I'm really considering moving all of this over to Google Keep. But historically, for me and my team, I put the information in Evernote, and that's where we go to look for it. We don't look in Google Docs or Word Docs or Pages or anything. We go look in Evernote. So wherever that is, just use it and be consistent. So let's just see if we've gotten some more folks out here. If you haven't, I will just say, if you have a question, put a Q colon in front of it, and during the Q&A portion, I will make sure I answer your question. So, and if you're just joining to listen, we're talking about how leaders use checklists to empower your team for project success. That is what we are talking about. So moving on to more housekeeping, you need to know how to design effective checklists. And you and your team need to work together to design all of these checklists together. Last week I talked about that, how to design a checklist. You can go back and watch the video, and if you have questions around it tonight, we can get it. We definitely want to collaborate with our team. We've talked about that already. And then we want to think about, and this goes into the designing, and we want to think about when do we use a specific checklist, because they don't all work at the same time for the same purpose. And so you need to know when to use which one. In the context of a project, which is what we're talking about, at the beginning of the project, you use a project kickoff checklist. As you start to move, you use tasks, assignments, and milestone tracking checklist. That's during executing. All the way through, you use a risk management checklist. And then at the close, you use a project closing checklist. And we're going to get a little bit into what all of those are. The last piece of your housekeeping is You absolutely have to maintain them and update them. If you have a checklist that's 5 years out of date, and it what you do and how you do it has changed and your checklist hasn't, you're not doing yourself any good. You're not helping your projects at all. So there you go. Again, if you have questions, put your questions in chat and I will get to them. So I talked about this dang on earpiece tonight. I talked about checklists to use. So I'm going to tell you the 5 checklists that we're going to use, we're going to talk about here tonight. So this is all about 5 checklists related to projects, and these are pretty common, and I would encourage you, if you don't have them, work with your team to develop them. The first one I mentioned earlier, and it's a can't talk. Project kickoff checklist. And this one is the very beginning because it helps you ensure that your project gets started well. It includes things like defining the goal of the project. What are you trying to accomplish? Defining who the team members are that you need. If you have a small team, you may need to extend your team to others outside of the small team that you have. What resources do you need? That's people and other things, physical things. You may need a basket. I don't know. You may need balloons, but the resources that you need. Most people think when you say resources, we're only talking people or money. No, it's other things. It definitely is not just people or money. That way, you're allocating your roles to your team and the responsibilities to the team. You're getting your resources together, and you are using this checklist to walk you through setting a clear timeline to execute specific milestones along the way. Another key one, I mentioned it, but I'm going to call it out. In this startup checklist, in this project kickoff checklist, because you're going to be talking to your key stakeholders, these are people who are affected by the project or people who can affect the project, you can get all of those down, and it would reduce your communication confusion along the way, because you won't be saying, I didn't know I was supposed to tell that person. I didn't even know that person would have anything to do with this or have a care. So your project kickoff checklist is a great way just to make sure you have a consistent way to walk through and get your project set up for success. The next checklist is your team assignment checklist. This one I'm really digging into because I've had to work on it. But this is, as you get started and tasks need to get done, oftentimes, especially if it's a little bit complex, you can't just tell your team member, go do, I'll give you an example of something I did. Go create me a PowerPoint deck for the meeting tomorrow. It's a little bit more involved than that. So if you use a task assignment checklist, it will guide you through things like defining what the purpose of the task is, the developing how long, an estimate of how many hours you think the task will take, or asking your team member to estimate how many hours it will take. Then defining how long it will take. It may take 6 hours, but that 6 hours may be over 3 weeks. So there's a difference. Most people think I need 2 weeks to do something, when in fact, they may need 2 hours, but they need 2 weeks to get those 2 hours done. Your task assignment checklist will lay out all of that. I remember many years ago, we had these little Post-it notes, but they had this kind of information on it, and we used them all the time. Whenever we had a task on a project, we would have whatever the name is, who it got assigned to, what the hour estimate was, what the duration estimate was, and anything else that the person would need to know. And it all fit on a little Post-it note. But this is a checklist. It's just making it so that you don't forget those details to give your team member when those task assignments are happening. And especially if they need specific resources, it makes sure that you can document those resources that the person needs. Example, I have someone, I wanted them to develop a project schedule. Well, me going through the checklist, I had on there, make sure the person has project scheduling software. So I remember to ask the person, do you have this software? And the answer was no. So then before I gave them the assignment, I said, let's go get you the software that you need. Task assignment checklist. The next one is a milestone tracking checklist. The majority of the time, you're not concerned, especially as the leader, you're not concerned about the day-to-day task, whether this task got done today or that task got done today. Most of the time, what you're concerned about, did a particular point in the project get reached when it was supposed to? Those points are called milestones. Is the contract signed? Yes or no? Is the invoice sent out? Yes or no? Is the speaker booked? Yes or no? Is the venue booked? Yes or no? It's not about the task to book the venue. It's, is the venue booked or not? If you're looking for a place to have your event, and that's your project. So these milestones, taking all of those crucial milestones and what dates they need to happen, and just having them in a checklist so you can check them off as you go. Huge, huge, huge. That's a great one, and it's going to be unique for every project that you have. Another good checklist in terms of projects is a risk management checklist. This one sometimes gets overlooked. Every time you have a project, there are risks associated. There are opportunities, which are also called risk, which is weird, but opportunities. Sometimes something will happen that's good, and you have an opportunity to take advantage of something that you didn't know you were going to have an opportunity to take advantage of when you started. Example, I'm planning a big event. Have an opportunity to have someone that I would have never thought would have been a part of this event. That's a risk, but we call them opportunities. Do I want to take advantage of it? Absolutely. Well, having that down, now I need to figure out what does it change in the event, and can I get this person in to the event without causing a downstream problem? That's the kind of stuff that's a risk. If you're working on a project where you have to do anything outside, weather is always a risk. A lot of times, this is when you're doing event planning, if you're going to be outside, most event planners and designers, if they're planning an outdoors event, they usually have an indoor venue also picked, and that's because they know the risk of rain or snow or whatever that may happen outside that will completely require them to shift their event to an indoor venue. So that's your risk management checklist. What are the things that you want to think through, and that you learn over time that your team can account for? So I'm going to take a break, and if you're getting value, go ahead and hit the like button. Let me know. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel, go ahead and subscribe to the channel, and I would love to see you as a member of this community, and participating and leaving me comments and asking me questions. Subscribe, and I apologize about these headphones. So the last checklist that I'm going to share with you today is the project closing checklist. If you're a leader, and I'm talking to leaders of teams, small, medium, large teams, and you have a project, you have to have some way of being sure that you're closing down your project and all of the details to effectively close down that project has happened. You cannot just walk away and say, my event is finished and I'm just going to walk out the door now. You can't do that. You've got to, depending on what it is. So let's just use this as an example. You have a team, but you've extended it, so you've had to bring some additional people in to participate. You need to properly release them. You need to let them know 2 weeks, 30 days, whatever your time frame is, that what day they're going to be released from the project. They may have to go on to something else or start looking for different work. You also need to make sure if there is invoicing or records that you need to update, all that stuff, put it on a project close checklist so you don't lose track of it. You also need to make sure if you borrowed equipment or borrowed material, it all gets returned and you know that it did, so nobody's looking for their stuff. If you have post-event promotions that you need to do, have those on your close checklist so that you don't forget to do the things after, quote unquote, the project has gone live. So your project closure checklist is the fifth of these key project specific checklists that are good, and they will save you headache. They will keep your team in alignment and working together, and everyone on the team will know exactly where you are in the project. Now, I've got a couple of specialty ones I want to share with you. And these are ones that I use. And one of them came out of a question that a community member asked. So the first specialty checklist I'm going to share with you is your check-in checklist. When I'm starting a new project, one of the items on one of the first one or two meetings I have with my team is determine our check-in. So this checklist walks me to how often do we need to do a check-in, depending on the length and the complexity of the project. It may be every day, it may be every week, it may be every 2 weeks. I usually don't go longer than 2 weeks. But whatever that frequency is, so that the team and I have an opportunity to talk and get that nailed down. Then an agenda for those check-ins. Oh my goodness. I'm going to cry. I'm sorry, y'all. I have to take a break. I'm going to cry. I'm going to cry right now. The love of my life. Hey, Jen. Thank you so much for dropping in. I love you. Don't make me cry. But get that check-in in so that you know how often and what is on your agenda, so that you are efficient and nobody's time is wasted. The other things I include is who's going to facilitate that check-in. I typically don't want it to be me. I want someone else to facilitate that meeting because it's a meeting and I want someone else to do that. And I have someone else document the results. So we decide this in that first 1 or 2 meetings we get together. And then we decide who's going to make sure all of the follow-up action items are taken care of. That's a checklist you can put together, and every time you start a project, in your first 1 to 2 meetings, run through those items, get them dialed in. It'll help your project and your team run much more smoothly together. And this next one. This one came from a community member. The community member asked, how did I use checklists to recover from a mistake? I make mistakes, you make mistakes. Mistakes are normal. And as I often say, there are no perfect people. So if you're looking for a perfect person, you're fooling yourself and everybody else. So how does using a checklist? So a checklist to learn from your mistakes is a powerful one. It helps you identify the root causes of the mistake. It'll help you prevent you from making the same mistake over because you're following through. It helps you improve your skills and your knowledge. It saves time and money. Why? You're not making the same mistake over and over again. And it helps you improve your team's performance because you're getting better and your team is getting better. And the power of this checklist is that you create a simple list. Again, doesn't matter what you put it in, where I do this at the close, toward the close of a project, and sometimes during milestone checks. But identify the mistakes that you've made. Have your team identify the mistakes that they've made. Be open and be transparent and be vulnerable enough to say you made a mistake. Then break down those mistakes into the small, actionable steps that you can identify so that you know where the root cause is. And then make a checklist to address whatever those problem areas are and apply those checklists to future projects. That's how you forget and you don't forget and don't make the same mistake. You update your checklist, you add a new one, and you make sure you run through it each and every time. So then you just review it. You review it each time, or a set of them, each time you start a new project. So if you have a question, put a Q colon in front of it, ask your question. I'll be glad to get an answer to you, and I may even make a video to answer the question. So there you go. You all know I love to give you action steps. I don't want you to leave here without something that you can do to apply the information that we have talked about tonight. That is 3 things. Work with your team to collaborate on the checklist that you need to execute your projects. Work with them. I gave you really 7. I told you I was going to give you 5, but I gave you 7 that you can start with. Then implement those checklists. Every project, use them. And you know I'm huge on this one. Review and improve your checklist as you go. Again, give your team feedback and get feedback from your team, and that's where you put the improvements in. It could be something simple. It could be a word change. It could be repositioning where an item is in the checklist. It could be changing the formatting. Whatever the improvements are, that's how they'll get better, and you and your team will use them. That's what I got for you all tonight. If you have not subscribed to the channel and you've been listening to us tonight, I would love for you to subscribe and become a part of the Equipping You community. We have fun and we want to help you. The other thing is, if you want to have a conversation, you can always go to florencedonald.live. You can schedule 15 minutes on my calendar. We can have a quick chat. I can find out what you're doing, answer some questions for you, and we can decide if we have more work to do together to fix the friction in your productivity system. And so with that, we actually have finished all of our topics tonight, all of the points that we wanted to cover tonight, and I'm so glad you were here. So glad you were here, and I am super duper excited because of this young lady who joined the chat tonight, Dr. Jen Cottle. If you have not followed her, please follow her channel. She will make you laugh because she is so real. She is so she does not have a fake bone in her body. She is so absolutely real, but she is a wealth of information. Plus, she's family, and I love her. So there you go. So glad to have her in the building with us tonight. So we are really done, and I'm going to say good night to you all, and hope to see you next Friday right here. And there'll be a video link here for this month's series on checklists. It'll get you through the playlist. You can go back and listen to last week. You'll be able to get some more information, and I also put some cards in for things that I've referenced throughout. Good night, everybody.